Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever felt, a bit overwhelmed by dense technical papers, complex research, well, you know our mission.
We take that complex source material, really extract the crucial insights.
And deliver them efficiently, thoroughly, right to you.
Today, we are doing a really critical deep dive. We're looking at the intersection of advanced AI and practical cybersecurity.
Right.
We are zeroing in on Chapter 7 of the source material. It focuses entirely on the real-world, scalable applications of reinforcement learning RL for penetration testing.
Yeah, this is where the theory really hits the network, isn't it? We're moving beyond just the math proofs and looking at 4 key RL-driven case studies.
That's it.
We're essentially pulling back the curtain on how these AI agents are trained to think like, well, incredibly sophisticated cyber attackers.
Learning their strategies, identifying vulnerabilities, moving laterally, staying hidden, all of that.
So consider us your instructors for this material today.
We're going to proceed sequentially, step by step, through these practical examples. And the overarching goal of this research, look, it's not just finding vulnerabilities. It's about understanding the adversary's strategic viewpoint, why they make the choices they do. So defensive strategies can be, well, vastly and intelligently improved.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We are starting with the first major application covered in Section 7.1, Crown Jewels Analysis, or CJA-RL.
Right, so the core objective here is critical. Identifying the optimal paths, the most efficient attack paths, to reach a network's most valuable assets, the crown jewels or CJs.
Okay.
We're training an agent to find the best way, factoring in constraints, not just any possible way. And that insight, well, it's non-negotiable if you want effective countermeasures.
Right, and to even start simulating an attack on something as complex as, say, an enterprise network, you need a kind of mathematical map, don't you?
You do.
That's where the Markov decision process, the MDP, comes in. But wait, before you can even build the MDP, you need the underlying blueprint, the attack graph.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The MDP is constructed over an attack graph. And that graph is generated using a specific logic programming tool called Molval.
Molval, okay.
And it's crucial we understand what Molval does.
Yeah.
Basically, it takes all the static config data of the network hosts, software, known vulnerabilities, connectivity rules, everything.
A whole inventory.
A whole shebang.
Yeah.
And it automatically generates this massive directed graph. It represents every possible state and every transition an attacker could potentially attempt.
So Molval gives you the territory, the map, and the MDP then defines the rules of engagement on that map.
Exactly right. In this graph, the vertices, the nodes, they represent the state space. That could be a specific network component like a server or maybe a host, or even a successful traversal mechanism like an active session.
Okay.
And the edges of the graph, those represent the actions A that the RL agent can take, moving the network from one state to another, so always aiming towards a CJ node.
So the agent is exploring this huge simulated graph, learning through trial and error, essentially. The whole training process uses the CJA algorithm, and it focuses the reward structure entirely on finding paths that end successfully at a crown jewel node.
That's the goal.
Now, the results. They yielded a very specific and maybe slightly counterintuitive insight about where the RL agent actually chose to spend its time.
Indeed. This was one of the most important takeaways, I think. There was this notable tendency that sort of seemed to defy traditional vulnerability management wisdom.
How so?
The most frequently visited nodes, the places the agent kept going back to, were closely associated with active session interaction rules.
Wait, hang on. Why does that matter specifically? If I were a blue team defender, maybe relying purely on automated scoring, I'd assume the RL agent would focus its efforts solely on hosts with the highest technical vulnerability rating, a critical CVSS score, 9 or 10.
Right, that's a common assumption.
So why prioritize these interaction rules instead?
Because context and realism in a strategic attack often trump those raw technical severity scores. Once an attacker is already inside the perimeter, they aren't usually looking for the biggest, loudest hole to crash through.
That's noisy.
Exactly. They're looking for the path of least detection risk, which often means blending in with normal traffic using existing pathways.
So we're talking about lateral movement here, moving sideways within the network.
Correct. These interaction rules are effectively the keys and key cards for that lateral movement. They highlight how pivotal certain hosts are in network traversal.
Okay.
It suggests the optimal path to the crown jewel doesn't involve, say, hammering on some external firewall rule. Like you said, that's noisy.
Right.
The optimal path often involves leveraging internal trust relationships, established session pathways. Think like a specific host having an active allowed SSH connection to a highly privileged database server.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like the difference between trying to break into an office building by smashing down the front door versus just using an employee's forgotten key card to walk right into the server room.
That's a perfect analogy.
The key card, the interaction rule, is a much safer, much more reliable pathway for the attacker, even if the front door technically has a bigger vulnerability, a weaker lock.
Precisely. The terminal node of the attack, the final step, often involves exploiting a host within a specific subnet, sure, but the path to reach that host, it favors engaging through these low-risk established interaction rules.
Hmm.
And understanding this behavior, that preference for traversal via active sessions, is absolutely vital for defenders.
So defenders need to prioritize monitoring and maybe enforcing zero trust principles on these specific pivotal hosts, the ones involved in these interaction rules.
Exactly, rather than simply patching based only on the highest CVSS score reported by a scanner.
So the CJARL model essentially gives the defender a hyper-focused list. It shows which systems, regardless of their CVSS score, are truly mission-critical for maintaining the network's segmentation integrity. That's really actionable intelligence.
It is. It tells you where the smart attacker is likely to go.
Okay, so building directly on that crown jewels analysis, the next case study, section 7.2, it kind of flips the script, right? Reverses the scenario.
It does. The motivation here is to simulate an adversary who's already achieved that initial compromise. They're in. They have the data.
Right. The breach already happened.
Now the focus is solely on finding quiet pathways, stealthy routes to exfiltrate that data while minimizing the chances of getting caught.
And this tackles that often overlooked part of an attack, the silent phase. We tend to obsess over stopping the unauthorized entry, but exfiltration is really a two-pronged problem, isn't it? You have to access the data, and then you have to transfer it out undetected.
Exactly. And traditional defenses, like perimeter firewalls, they often struggle with that second part if the traffic looks sort of benign or normal.
Yeah.
So this RL model specifically addresses that defense gap. The RL environment here is structured for, well, maximum realism they could achieve at the time.
How so?
The state representation for each host, it's a detailed 1D vector. It details its status. Is it compromised? Is it reachable? Has it been discovered by the agent yet?
Okay.
Along with its configurations like the OS running, the services available,
Yeah.
standard stuff. And the actions are typical offensive operations. Scanning, trying exploits, privilege escalation.
But the real ingenuity, the part that really dictates how the agent behaves, is in that tailored reward function. They call it the service-based defensive terrain.
Absolutely. This is a really critical enhancement to the core CVSS MDP model they started with. They incorporate service-based risk penalties.
Okay, risk penalties.
Yeah, based on the realistic assumption that defenses think antivirus, advanced firewalls, detailed authentication tracking are highly correlated with the sensitivity of the services available on a given host.
Right. You protect what's most important or what's most likely to be attacked. Can you walk us through those service categories they used and why the penalty structure is weighted the way it is?
Sure. Services are categorized into 4 types: authentication, data, security, and common. And they're assigned this hierarchy of costs or negative rewards that reflect their presumed monitoring level.
Okay.
Attacking authentication services incurs the highest penalty, MATIS 6.
Ouch.
Data services get a NATIS 4 penalty, and security and common services both get a NATIS 2 penalty.
Huh. Why is authentication riskier for the agent than data? Intuitively, I might think the data server is the crown jewel, the ultimate target.
Yeah, that's the modeling assumption they made.
Right.
While the data server holds the actual value, the target data, the authentication server, like a domain controller or an identity management system, holds the keys to the kingdom.
Okay.
And therefore, it's assumed to be the most heavily monitored, logged, and defended system on the network. Exploiting an authentication service is likely to trigger immediate high-fidelity alerts.
So the agent learns that attacking it comes with a big penalty.
Right. The agent knows it incurs a heavy penalty because the model assumes security practitioners prioritize defenses based on the riskiest service available on that host.
So this means the model is intrinsically motivated to choose paths that avoid the most heavily defended services, the ones with the highest penalties. It prioritizes stealth over speed, basically.
That's the idea. Now let's look at the complexity they introduced with the double agent DA architecture. 2 interacting ATC models.
Right, 2 agents working together. One picks the action, the other evaluates it.
Sort of, yeah. One agent selects the next action, and a second agent evaluates the quality or the value of being in the resulting state. It's conceptually sophisticated, aiming for maybe a more robust path selection process.
But the experimental results showed something important, right? About speed.
They did, a crucial finding. The DA configuration actually resulted in a slower convergence rate compared to the standalone A2C model.
That seems counterintuitive again. Why add the complexity of two interacting agents if it learns slower? Was there some other benefit? Like, was the final path better or more robust, justifying that speed hit?
That's the essential trade-off, exactly. While convergence was slower, the argument is that the DA architecture can sometimes produce more robust, less brittle policies over the long term, maybe reducing the chance of catastrophic failure in edge cases.
Okay.
But the slower speed is definitely a result of the inherent complexity. You've got interagent dynamics, the agents have to communicate, align their goals, which adds computational overhead to the whole learning process.
Gotcha. But still, the variations in path selection based on those different risk profiles, adjusting the penalty scale factors, that still highlights the model's utility for strategic defense planning, right? Regardless of whether you use one agent or two.
Absolutely. By seeing how the agent fundamentally changes its pathing, when you adjust that penalty scale, say, you increase the penalty for attacking data services, cybersecurity teams get a kind of strategic blueprint.
How so?
They can prioritize their defenses based on the most likely attacker profile they expect to face. Is it a smash-and-grab attacker willing to take high risks?
Or is it someone really trying to be stealthy?
Right. Someone who will take a highly circuitous but very low penalty path. This lets defenders model different worst-case scenarios based on varying threat actor motivations and capabilities.
Okay, moving on to section 7.3, command and control channels, C2. We know C2 detection is often like the last line of defense against malware that's already slipped past initial protections.
It's already inside.
So why is focusing an RL agent specifically on discovering these potential C2 channels so important for the blue teams, for the defenders?
Well, awareness of potential C2 channels is really imperative for defenders because it helps reduce the threat posed by dormant malware.
Ah, the sleeper agents.
Exactly. If an adversary has successfully deployed a payload and is just sitting there undetected, it can be awakened later to exfiltrate data or pivot deeper into the network or launch ransomware.
Yeah, lots of bad options.
Right. So by simulating how these stealthy connections might be created, defenders gain insight into how they might proactively disrupt those pathways before they get activated.
Okay. And the methodology here uses a detailed three-stage campaign model. This seems designed to emulate a realistic attack campaign over time, forcing the agent to think strategically, not just one step at a time.
That temporal element is absolutely key. Stage 1 is infection. This typically involves things like subnet scans or exploiting known CVEs to get that initial foothold.
Standard stuff.
Stage 2 is connection. Now the agent, or the malware it represents, attempts to connect back to the remote C2 server. But critically, this requires navigating dynamic firewalls.
Ah, the defenses fight back.
Right. And the research modeled that too frequent connection attempts can actually trigger emergency firewall updates, significantly increasing the risk of detection for the agent.
Okay, makes sense.
And the final stage.
Stage 3, exfiltration. This involves uploading portions of the final payload, maybe stolen data, over time. And this stage requires the agent to implement strategic pauses. They call them sleep actions.
Sleeping.
To avoid detection by those dynamic firewall systems that are looking for sustained activity or unusual patterns.
Gotcha. Let's focus a bit more on those firewall dynamics. The firewalls here aren't just static rule sets, are they? They simulate a more dynamic, responsive security operations center.
They're crucial to the realism, yeah. They're logically located between the internal subnets and the internet gateway. And they have two update mechanisms.
Two ways they change.
Yep. First, they get updated periodically based on a walk-lock time mechanism that simulates, standard IT policy updates pushed out every few hours or daily.
Okay, normal operations.
But they also undergo emergency updates. These are triggered by specific conditions the firewall monitors, like excessive connection attempts from an internal host in a short window, or abnormal upload volumes detected going outbound. So when the agent trips one of those thresholds and triggers an emergency update, what actually happens in the simulation? Does the firewall just block the connection cold?
Not necessarily an immediate block, but it instantly imposes a massive new penalty. It drastically reduces the reward associated with that action or that source host in the future.
Ah, okay.
So it makes subsequent actions from that point or using that path incredibly costly in terms of negative reward. The agent learns very quickly to avoid those conditions at all costs.
Right.
It's like the RL equivalent of setting off a big red alarm in the simulated SOC.
Right. So to handle this complex, dynamic environment with the sleeping and the firewalls, they used the proximal policy optimization PPO algorithm,
That's right.
which, as we know, is generally known for better stability and sample efficiency compared to some older algorithms like A2C, especially in complex state spaces. And they capped the episodes at 10,000 steps to keep training manageable.
Right. And looking at the key results, we can actually quantify the level of stealth the agent managed to achieve in an evaluation across 100 different simulated runs or trajectories.
Yeah.
The agent successfully attacked at least one host in all 100 cases, so it was robustly successful in achieving the initial goal. And the task was typically completed in about 107 steps on average.
Okay, 107 steps. But the most illuminating detail, maybe the most counterintuitive one again, is how the agent leveraged the environment, especially those sleep actions, to stay stealthy. This leads to what you call the stealth paradox.
Absolutely. Get this. The agent averaged over 32 deliberate sleep actions in each successful episode.
32 pauses. That's a lot of waiting around.
It confirms a strategic understanding of timing, using pauses to evade detection. Now, here's the paradox. The agent consistently chose the fast upload option over the slow one when exfiltrating data.
Hold on, that seems completely backwards. Conventional wisdom, especially for APTs, is low and slow, right? Trickle the data out over weeks or months to avoid detection. Why did the RL agent choose to upload quickly?
Because it recognized through learning that the primary detection risk in this simulated environment wasn't the total volume of traffic over a long period. It was the active duration of the connection and the rate of connection attempts triggering those emergency firewall updates.
Ah, okay.
By choosing the fast upload, it minimizes the total active time the connection is open and transferring data for that chunk.
Right. Less time exposed.
Exactly. It then uses those 32-odd sleep actions as strategic buffers. It waits out the wall clock update cycle of the firewall, maybe lets timers reset, ensures it stays below the connection attempt frequency threshold before the next burst.
So instead of being low and slow consistently, the optimal strategy the agent found was more like fast upload burst followed by long silence, then repeat.
Precisely. Fast bursts punctuated by strategic pauses.
Huh?
And this is crucial for defenders.
How so?
It suggests we should prioritize detection tools, focused perhaps more on traffic burst monitoring, identifying unusually high-volume data transfers that then immediately drop back to silence rather than only looking for persistent, minimal background traffic flows.
Interesting.
It models an intelligent strategic evasion tactic rather than just brute force data transfer.
Okay, now we shift focus again. We're moving away from C2 and going right back to the very beginning of the attack chain, advanced reconnaissance, or recon. Section 7.4 tackles exposing surveillance detection rights, or SDRs.
Right.
The goal here seems really unique. It's about identifying paths that an adversary might traverse to gain maximum surveillance exposure, basically, gather as much intel as possible, like open ports, running services, protocols,
while simultaneously minimizing the risk of detection. It's a balancing act.
So you're essentially training an AI spy.
That's a good way to put it. The agent wants to observe as much as possible without being observed itself. It needs to gather crucial intelligence, that's the positive reward, without tripping any alarms, avoiding the negative penalty.
Okay, and this study introduced two major differentiators, two new techniques to achieve this high-level, risk-aware kind of exploration.
That's right. The first one is really interesting, the warm-up phase.
A warm-up.
Yeah. This seems designed specifically to overcome one of the inherent weaknesses often seen in RL agents, that initial period of inefficient, almost blind exploration.
Right, where they just stumble around bumping into walls.
What's fascinating here is it addresses that classic exploration versus exploitation dilemma head-on, but in a novel way. During this unique phase, the RL agent interacts with the network, sends out probes, gets responses, but it does not update its learning weights.
So it's not actually learning a policy yet.
No, not yet. It functions purely as an observer during warm-up. It's scouting the environment, noting which nodes offer high information gain, positive reward for surveillance, and crucially, which ones seem likely to trigger defenses, high penalty associated with them.
So the agent is essentially mapping the terrain first, figuring out the safe zones and the danger zones before it commits any brain power or training resources to actually learning how to navigate it optimally.
Exactly. It uses that observed data from the warm-up to build an initial map, a kind of domain awareness. And this guides the agent to focus its subsequent actual training phase on the most promising areas the rewarding and relatively safe parts of the network.
Which should dramatically improve efficiency, right? By avoiding wasting computation cycles, blindly exploring low-reward, highly risky segments of the network.
Precisely. It mirrors the meticulous, cautious approach maybe a human nation-state operator would take. You gather intel carefully before you make big moves.
That seems like a huge potential time saver in training. Because, yeah, blind exploration in a complex network simulation can be computationally disastrous.
It really can. And this leads neatly into the second key differentiator, which also involves efficiency. To handle this multi-layered reconnaissance challenge, the study utilized the DAPPO model.
Okay, so the double agent architecture again, like in the exfiltration study.
Yes, but this time combined with the proximal policy optimization algorithm, PPO.
Right, PPO instead of A2C. And that combination demonstrated superior convergence speed compared to the earlier attempts with DA-A2C.
The efficiency gains were quite significant. According to the results, the DAPPO model reportedly converged in less than 10 minutes.
Wow, 10 minutes.
Yeah, significantly faster than the 30 minutes required by the older DA-A2C model for a similar task. This shift to PPO really highlights the demand for sample efficiency in these complex dynamic environments.
It makes the whole system much more practical for rapid, real-world application where time and compute resources are always critical constraints.
Definitely. And the experiments also provided this direct, powerful link between the model's risk penalty setting, how much negative reward it gets for potentially risky actions, and the type of attacker persona it successfully emulates.
Ah, this is interesting, connecting the model's behavior directly to different attacker profiles.
This is perhaps the most actionable finding for defense planning from this section. When the penalty scale is set low, they use scale 1 as an example.
Low penalty means the agent doesn't care much about risk.
Exactly. The agent behaves like a less sophisticated actor. Maybe think smash and grab operations or opportunistic attackers. It accepts higher risk, performs noisy scans like large ICMP sweeps, and tries to enumerate multiple services indiscriminately because the penalty for getting caught is low in its calculation.
Okay, the noisy amateur. And conversely, a high penalty scale, like scale 11, that models the behavior of strategic actors, the highly competent APTs or nation-state groups.
That's right. At high penalty scales, the agent displays highly risk-averse behavior. It minimizes its footprint. It opts for the most narrow, targeted path. It actively avoids traversing multiple protocols or services if possible.
So the agent is forced to make those difficult trade-offs we see in the real world. Do I accept higher risk to gather more surveillance data, or do I take less risk but potentially miss some information?
Precisely that trade-off.
So for the blue team, how do they practically translate that scale 11 behavior, the simulated nation-state actor, into actual deployable defenses? What does simulating that kind of threat tell them to prioritize?
Well, it tells them to focus their highest fidelity monitoring on boundary systems and critical internal infrastructure, absolutely. But more specifically, it suggests implementing deep packet inspection, looking for anomalies, even in low-volume, unexpected protocols.
Why low volume?
Because if the agent is highly risk-averse, scale 11, it won't be doing noisy, high-volume TCP SYN scans everywhere. It will likely be subtly checking for specific open ports using unexpected low-volume protocols that might be easier to hide within background noise. Think maybe crafted DNS queries or specific ICMP message types.
Stuff that might slip past basic signature matching.
Exactly. Defending against that simulated scale 11 actor requires high-fidelity behavioral analytics, anomaly detection, not just signature matching looking for known bad patterns.
Okay, so we circle back now to exfiltration. But this is an enhanced, more advanced analysis in Section 7.5. We're moving beyond that initial study we discussed.
Right. This section tackles the really critical real-world elements of protocol choice and payload size.
Ah, volume matters.
Immensely.
Yeah.
This is essential for realistically simulating adversaries who need to exfiltrate large volumes of data stealthily. Think gigabytes, not just kilobytes.
Yeah, in real life, getting gigabytes of data out without getting caught is a massive challenge. It generates a lot of network traffic, requires sustained effort over time. The previous model didn't fully account for how that sheer volume and the specific network protocol you choose to use truly affects detection risk over time.
Exactly. So this simulation incorporates a highly realistic network setup to address that. Firewalls are absolutely key again. They monitor egress traffic specifically.
Looking at bound.
Right. And they're programmed to trigger alerts and those emergency updates if either the total egress volume from a host crosses a threshold or if the active connection time exceeds predefined limits.
So both volume and duration are being watched closely by the simulated firewall.
Yes. And to truly simulate the reality of that waiting game, the patience required for large exfiltration, they included a wall clock
A
mechanism.
clock in the simulation.
Yes. The simulation includes a mechanism to emulate real-time duration passing. It adjusts the passage of simulated time variably based on the complexity and expected duration of the action being taken.
So like an exploitation attempt might only take a few simulated seconds.
Right. But uploading, say, 100 megabytes of data over a particular protocol will take a significant calculated duration in simulated wall clock time.
And that realism forces the RL agent to plan not just for sequential actions, but for the actual time duration of those actions and how they accumulate towards triggering those firewall detection thresholds over time.
Precisely. It adds a whole new layer of constraint and realism. The study also explicitly tested scalability, which, as you said, is one of the biggest hurdles in applying RL to large, messy, real-world enterprise networks.
How did they test that?
They used two distinct network environments. Network 1 was smaller, 10 subnets, 56 hosts. Good for initial testing, seeing if the basic concepts worked, checking convergence.
Okay, the lab network.
Kind of, but Network 2 was the real proving ground, a much larger and more complex topology. 18 subnets, over 200 hosts.
Whoa, okay. That's getting closer to a small enterprise.
Yeah. This second network rigorously tested the model's scalability and adaptability. It forced the agent to navigate a vastly increased state space, many more possible actions, much longer potential paths.
So in that 200-plus host environment, did the RL agent struggle? Did the increased action space cause problems, or did the careful MDP formulation and the PPO algorithm handle that complexity reasonably well?
Apparently, the combination of the MDP formulation and the PPO algorithm proved highly robust, even on the larger network. The training showed stable progress, and the RL policy converged efficiently. And interestingly, as training progressed, the agent became faster, more efficient. It completed the exfiltration tasks more swiftly and took fewer unnecessary actions, even in that complex 200-plus host network. This helps confirm the scalability of the underlying approach.
Okay, that's promising. And regarding the actual exfiltration path strategy it learned, what was the most effective approach the agent adopted in that large, constrained network?
Well, in the larger network scenario, the agent successfully navigated from a highly constrained, compromised starting point, they mentioned host 8 too, in subnet 8, which was explicitly not directly connected to the internet.
So it had to pivot first.
It had to find a path out. And the agent's optimized policy, the strategy it learned, strongly emphasized paths that utilize a single network protocol throughout the entire exfiltration chain.
A single protocol, like sticking purely to DNS or purely to ICMP or purely to HTTPS.
Exactly. This single protocol approach is really the essence of stealthy exfiltration techniques we see in the wild. It aligns perfectly with documented real-life attacker strategies, things like DNS tunneling or ICMP exfiltration.
Okay, but why does choosing just one protocol significantly reduce the risk of discovery?
Well, think about it from the perspective of a detection system, especially behavioral analysis or anomaly detection. Using a single protocol reduces the complexity and the variability of the traffic patterns associated with the exfiltration.
Consistency is key.
Right. If an adversary tunnels all their exfiltration traffic through, say, DNS queries, the goal is to make it look like slightly abnormal, maybe, but still plausibly legitimate DNS traffic overall.
Blending in.
Blending in. This looks far less anomalous to sophisticated detection algorithms than if the malicious traffic signature is constantly switching back and forth between HTTPS, then SLH, then maybe some FTP, then some ICMP. That erratic switching is a huge red flag.
Okay.
The model demonstrated that minimizing the protocol footprint and maximizing the consistency of the chosen covert channel is key to surviving those dynamic firewalls monitoring time and volume.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really shows that by layering in these realistic constraints like time, volume thresholds, protocol consistency, the RL models start to generate truly practical and realistic attack paths that mirror the trade-offs advanced adversaries have to make. Hashtag tag outro.
So if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, Chapter 7 really demonstrates a critical evolution in how we can model cybersecurity threats and defenses. We've seen how these RL agents, by systematically incorporating realistic cyber terrain, dynamic defenses that react, and carefully engineered reward functions tailored to specific attacker objectives.
Yeah, whether it's finding the crown jewels or setting up stealthy C2 channels or performing that really risk-aware reconnaissance.
Exactly. They can move past the limitations of static purely theoretical attack graphs that we used to rely on. They generate practical, context-aware attack paths that reflect real-world constraints.
And these applications, they're not just academic exercises. They serve as potentially essential planning tools, right? For human penetration testers, they could automate parts of vulnerability discovery, help prioritize where limited engagement time should be spent, almost like a force multiplier.
That's a good way to think about it.
And for the cyber defenders, the blue teams, these models help anticipate adversary trade-offs, like the choice between speed and stealth we kept seeing. This allows defenders to maybe prioritize monitoring resources and defensive postures based on more sophisticated AI-modeled threat predictions.
Agreed. However, these powerful models, as shown in Chapter 7, still face that grand challenge of generalization. Meaning currently, the agents are typically trained extensively on each specific network individually. They learn its unique layout, its specific rules, its firewall behaviors.
They don't transfer learning well between different network environments yet.
Not easily, no. And this raises a really important question for the next generation of this research, a final provocative thought, perhaps.
Yeah.
How will future RL models utilize techniques like multitask learning, MTL?
MTL, that's training one agent to achieve several different goals simultaneously, right? Like
Right.
finding crown jewels and identifying SDRs with the same agent.
Precisely. And how will they combine that with multi-objective learning, MOL?
Which is about balancing conflicting goals, like maximizing the surveillance data gathered while simultaneously minimizing the detection risk penalty.
Exactly. Will the combination of MTL and MOL allow these agents to finally generalize knowledge effectively across thousands of different networks? Will they be able to predict and expose vulnerabilities in network environments they have never actually seen or been trained on before?
Wow. That ability to predict the unknown based on generalized adversarial insight learned from vast data sets, that really does feel like the next frontier for AI in cyber operations. Something to definitely keep an eye on.
It certainly is.